So, have you ever heard about an area called Rus, or as the famous traveler Ibn Battuta calls it, the land of darkness? Well, believe it or not, but these were the names that were kind of allocated for the area we today know as Europe. And these names were given to them by the Arabs almost 1,000 years ago. So today, when I say Europe or I say America or any other place that is far off from where you're living, or if you're in Europe, if I say, well, Korea or South Asia, you have an instant image of the kind of people that there might be, the kind of things they may like, dislike. And we know a lot more today because obviously, technology and whatnot. But back in the day, like 1,000 years ago, the only way you could know exactly what kind of people lived in a far off area was to actually go there and see it for yourself. So, what did the Arabs think about the Europeans 1,000 years ago? Hi, my name is Misha and welcome to Tarihi Tales. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and if you want to help support this channel, you can become a paid member. There are multiple ways to help out. And as usual, all my sources will be down below in the description box if you want to go and have a look at it yourself. Now, to understand the Arab perspective of Europeans, we first have to see, well, what was the norm for Arabs? Like, what would they consider normal? So say if a stranger showed up in Arab lands, what would their behavior usually be? So usually Arab tradition actually is very, very hospitable and they treat guests with the utmost respect. Some of the people who've gotten very, very famous for this are people like Hatim al-Tai or Hatim Tai. And then as we move on in history, Islam comes into the picture because it originates in Arabia. And Islam also propagates this teaching of being very, very respectful of your guests, of being very courteous, and of thinking about them as a gift from God. So the norm for most of the Arabs was to be very, very nice to strangers. And maybe it's because of this exact thing that when they interacted with the Europeans of that time, they had a bit of a shock. Also, two things to note. Now, the time period I'm talking about, now Europe as an entity did not exist at that time, right? Not as we know it today. Today it's like a continent, a united number of states, which kind of have free flow of trade and information, a lot of things going on. But at that time, Europe was not a single entity. I'll be using the term Europe though to kind of make it easier for us to understand what area we're talking about geographically, okay? Now, the Arabs actually call this area Rus. And the second thing I want to mention is that a number of different Arab travelers actually visited these areas, and a lot of them had very, very different opinions about what kind of people they had met, which makes it kind of confusing at first. Now, our story begins in the 10th century. Now, this is also around the time that when you look at European history, they say that they were in the Dark Ages. But in the rest of the world, the Muslim world was kind of on the rise because there was a lot of innovation and studying, all of these kind of things going on. And our story begins with a guy called Ibn Hawqal. He was a geographer and he wrote a book called Kitab Surat al-Ard. And in that book, he describes the Europeans as Hamaj, which kind of means barbarians. He then writes a second volume of this book, and in that book, he breaks down the people of Rus into three categories. And within those three categories, he mentions a specific type of people called the Arthanias, whose capital is a place called Irtha, and they kill any travelers or strangers that wander into their lands. He basically writes, and I quote, "I have not heard any stranger dare enter this city because its people kill strangers who set foot in their country. They go in boats for trading. They don't tell anything about themselves or their business. They don't let any stranger accompany them or enter their country. From Irtha, one gets black sable, black foxes, lead, and mercury." Now, one thing to note about Ibn Hawqal's account is that he doesn't give his own opinion on the people of Irtha. He's simply telling us what he's heard about these people from others. Another account that talks about Rus is a book that was again written in the 10th century, somewhere around 903 CE, called Kitab al-Alaq al-Nafisa. Now, this book was written by a guy called Ibn Rusta. And Rusta observes that Rusia, the people of Rus, live in an island surrounded by a lake. They have a king called Hakan Rus. They invade Al-Sakiliba by boats, take women as captives, and sell them in Khazran and Bulbar. They have no cultivated fields. They eat what they plunder from Al-Sakiliba. They are traders in sable, squirrel, and other hairy animals. They are clean in their clothing. The well-to-do man will wear a golden bracelet. They are kind to their slaves. The Rusia have many cities. And this is where the accounts kind of start to differ, because Ibn Rusta now says that they are hospitable to their guests and treat foreigners quite well when asked for help. They would defend those who were wronged and assist them. They have corrosive swords. If a group of them was attacked, they would stand united in the face of the enemy till they defeat him. But Al-Rusia also have tyrannical traits. If some people do not accept the rule of the king, then the sword would be the final judge. They resort to tricks and magic. In order to please their god and to be close to him, they tend to kill people as sacrifices. A brother would covet the fortune of his own brother. A woman would be buried with her dead husband while she is still alive. The grave would be sealed so that she would die. They do not burn their dead. Ibn Rusta actually talks about a lot of other things as well about the people of Rus. But the most notable thing is the fact that he finds the people of Rus to be very, very hospitable. They're very nice to their guests. But that is in stark contradiction to what Ibn Hawqal had said in the same century. So there's a bit of a confusion as to why there are such starkly different accounts of the people of the same area. Now, we don't know a definitive answer, but in the 10th century, we find another historian and a geographer called Al-Masudi. And in his book, he actually talks about the fact that the term Rus is kind of used to talk about a number of different nations in the same area. It's not talking about just one state. So it's very possible that Ibn Hawqal and Ibn Rusta are both actually talking about the people of Rus, but maybe those people belong to different states. So they either don't understand that there is diversity within the Rus people, or they don't know that. Then we fast forward to the 12th century. And in the 12th century, we have a guy named Al-Idrisi. Now, he worked for Roger II, who was the Norman king of Sicily after the Muslims had left. And he's said to have traveled Europe extensively, and he had the same experience as Ibn Hawqal, because Idrisi again talks about a specific kind of Rusi people that kill foreigners. He says, that merchants rarely enter these towns because they kind of kill whoever enters them. Then we have another account of the Rusi people from the 14th century where Al-Damishqi basically says that these people have white colored skin, they have blonde hair, and then he also kind of gives a rationale. He says that because these people live in a climate zone which is extremely cold, and because of their distance from the sun, their behavior had degenerated and their hearts had become very harsh. Those who are further north, where cold is even worse, they are like animals. Indeed, they care for nothing but war, fighting and hunting. They don't feel any gratitude. He then quotes from Al-Idrisi's book, the Nuzhat al-Mushtaq, and he says that certain salves, he called them salves, and he says that they also eat the foreigners who enter their lands. The original text translation actually goes like this: some salves eat whatever foreigner falls into their hands because they live like beasts in jungles and forests near the ocean. Now, we also have some other accounts where people describe one of the groups that we talked about earlier called the Kubayya, and they describe them as Turks, but they also live in the area of Rus. So then again, it kind of makes sense that Rus was kind of a larger area with a lot of different states and probably nationalities as well. Then of course comes the famous Moroccan traveler Ibn Battuta, and he comes around in the 14th century, and he actually has a very different account because he doesn't even call it Rus. He calls it the land of darkness, which is very dramatic. And he mentions all this in a book that he wrote, which is a very interesting name. I like the name. It's called Tofat al-Nazar fi Gharaib al-Amsar wa Ajaib al-Asfar, which translates to a gift to those who contemplate the wonders of cities and the marvels of traveling. It sounds like such a whimsical name for a travelogue. I like it. So in this book, when he talks about the land of darkness, or Rus, he says, I had wished to enter the land of darkness. One can go there from Bulgar. The distance is 40 days. Then I changed my mind. I had to take a lot of provisions, and the journey was not really worth it. One had to travel in small carriages pulled by husky dogs. This tundra is covered with ice. No foot of any human or animal can stand there. The dogs have nails which manage to clutch to the ice. Only strong merchants who own 100 or so carriages are the ones who travel there. They had to take along food, drink, and wood, for there is no tree or stone or anything in these regions. The guide is the dog who had crossed this land several times. It is valued about 1,000 dinars. The carriage is tied to its neck. There are other 3 dogs as well. Other carriages pulled by dogs follow. If the main dog stopped, they would all stop. No one would mistreat his dog or beat it. Food is given first to the dogs, not to humans. Otherwise, the dogs get angry and leave the people to die in this tundra. So basically, the journey itself was very, very difficult, and he thought that it might not be worth it. But then he goes on to talk about the people themselves, and he says, the inhospitable and unfriendly nature of certain people in the land of darkness towards foreigners and strangers, according to these people, seem to lack any desire to socialize with the other, even in matters such as trade. So from what we've seen so far, there are a number of different types of people that lived in that area, and all the different Arab travelers, they didn't have one opinion about what kind of people they were. All of them had their own opinions. Ibn Hawqal talks about the people who would kill foreigners who entered their area. Now Ibn Rusta talks about northern Europeans who were very, very hospitable, very fair and honest. And Ibn Battuta kind of gives us an account of fear and of people who are not willing to socialize with the travelers or the people who go to that land. We also had some accounts where people quoted that the people of Rus would eat the travelers or foreigners that would stumble onto their lands. And one thing that historians note is that in all of these Arab travelogues, the Arabs almost never try to give their own opinion on as to what kind of people they think these people are. They only either tell us what they've experienced or what they've heard from other travelers. But the only way they kind of try to justify the nature of these people is through the climatic zones, which was a very, very popular geographical mark for the Arabs. That's how they divided the world. And the general belief was that people who lived in the 6th or 7th clime, which was very, very cold, or in the climes which were very hot, both of those types of people tend to have some different attributes, and their natures would get a little bit distorted because of the harsh climate that they had to bear. I can kind of understand that because God knows, in Pakistan, in the summer heat, nobody's happy. Nobody wants to do anything. And I don't blame them. It's suffocating. But now during these same time periods, we also have records of actually very, very positive interactions between some Arab states and the Europeans. But in those cases, these interactions were almost always between state officials visiting the European states officially, right? They weren't random travelers like Ibn Battuta or Ibn Hawqal. They weren't just people who up and went to the land to see. So if there was a state delegation, the Europeans would treat them with a lot of respect, and a lot of positive feedback kind of comes back from that place. One of the examples of such interaction is Yahya ibn Hakam al-Ghazal. He was chosen by the Umayyad Empire as their ambassador to Jutland, which was an area. I don't know which area. And he records that he was actually welcomed very, very well there. But some other sources tell us that this guy was also very, very handsome. And he earned the nickname Al-Ghazal over there, which meant beautiful. So maybe that was also one of the factors that he was so well liked. He got pretty privilege. There's another book called Rihlat ibn Jubair, which means the travels of Ibn Jubair. It was written in the 12th century. And this guy actually talks about a very, very positive interaction that he had with the Norman king of Sicily when he went to pilgrimage and was coming back. They were stuck in a very bad position, and the king did something extraordinary and really helped out all the Muslims who did not expect any of that. I'll actually make a video on this separately, and I'll be posting that next week because I thought it's a very cute little incident. But for now, this was a snapshot of what the Arabs generally thought of the Europeans from the time ranging from the 10th to the 14th century, which also coincides with the time that Europe was in the Dark Ages. Did you already know what the Arabs thought about them? Or was this new? Tell me what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you next time. Bye.